You think you know everything about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, but her own mother, Darlene Hamlet, just broke her silence and dropped a bombshell that changed absolutely everything. For weeks, we've been listening to her husband, Brian Hooker, tell this tragic story about how his wife supposedly bounced off the back of a dinghy into rough seas in the Bahamas, leaving him to desperately bushwhack through sharp, agonizing rocks with bare feet just to find help. But Darlene just exposed a secret story Brian told her behind closed doors, one he completely hid from the media. Brian claimed that after washing ashore, he actually stood on a main road, flagged down a passing car, and begged for help. But the driver allegedly locked the doors and sped off into the dark. He then claimed he pounded on the doors of two nearby houses, but no one answered. Here is the massive catch that points the finger straight at him. If he was already on a paved road with running cars and residential houses, why did he tell the police and the public that he was trapped, lost, and hacking his way through dense wild jungle? And if his feet were supposedly shredded by sharp rocks, why did rescuers find him wearing perfectly clean blue rubber slides without a single scratch on his skin? Darlene's new revelations don't just crack his timeline wide open, they make Brian look like a master manipulator who got caught in his own web of lies. You cannot afford to skip a single second of this video, because what Lynette's mother shares next completely dismantles Brian's innocence and exposes what really happened to her daughter. Stay right here, because this gets incredibly dark. Darlene Hamlet sat in the quiet of her home, clutching old family photographs of her daughter, Lynette Hooker. For over 5 weeks, she had endured a deafening silence from the one person who should have been mourning by her side, her son-in-law, Brian Hooker. When federal agents finally swooped down on the Fort Pierce Coast Guard station and wrapped the couple's 46-foot luxury sailboat, Soulmate, in bright yellow crime scene tape, Darlene didn't cry. Instead, she called it her official Mother's Day present. It was the moment the world stopped looking at a tragic maritime accident and started looking at a potential crime. But the real fracture in Brian's innocence didn't come from the federal warrants. It came directly from a private conversation Brian had with Darlene on the phone just days after Lynette vanished into the Bahamian waters. A conversation filled with strange, contradictory details that he carefully omitted from his emotional interviews with major television networks. Brian had painted a harrowing picture for the public, claiming that after Lynette allegedly fell from their towed dinghy into pitch-black, treacherous waves, he was left marooned, terrified, and forced to violently bushwhack his way through razor-sharp, jagged coral rocks with bare, bleeding feet just to reach the safety of the Marsh Harbor Marina. He used this brutal terrain as his ultimate alibi to explain away the massive, unaccounted hours in his timeline. But when he spoke to his grieving mother-in-law, his story grew completely different legs. He told Darlene a narrative that completely shatters his public defense. Brian claimed that after washing ashore, he didn't stumble through an impassable wild jungle. He claimed he actually made it directly to a paved road. He told Darlene that as he stood on the asphalt, soaking wet and frantic, a car emerged from the darkness. Brian claimed he stood in the middle of the street, flagged the vehicle down, and screamed to the driver that his wife was lost at sea. But according to Brian, the driver didn't jump out to help. Instead, the driver looked at him, deliberately locked the car doors, slammed on the gas, and sped away into the night, leaving him completely abandoned on the pavement. The immediate question that leaves investigators cold is simple. If Brian was already on a fully accessible residential road where cars were actively driving, why did he tell the police and the media that he was trapped in dense, unnavigable brush? Why create a dramatic tale of survival in the wilderness if a clear road was right beneath his feet? But the lie unravels even further. Brian told Darlene that after the phantom car sped off, he ran up to two nearby houses. He claimed he stood on their porches, frantically pounding on the doors until his fists were bruised. But because it was Easter weekend, the homes were entirely empty. He used the holiday weekend to justify why no one heard his cries for help. Yet when rescue personnel finally located Brian the next morning, walking near the marina, his story met its most devastating physical contradiction. He wasn't limping. His skin wasn't torn. Despite claiming he had just navigated miles of sharp, agonizing ground that was shredding his feet, he was found calmly walking around in a pair of perfectly clean blue rubber slides. There was not a single scratch, cut, or drop of blood on his feet or ankles. The rubber sandals were completely intact, exposing a manufactured journey designed to hide a much darker reality happening out on the water. The physical evidence on Brian's feet completely collapsed his survival story. But the forensic anomalies waiting inside the dark chambers of the Soulmate would soon deliver a much heavier blow. When Brian first phoned Darlene to deliver the news of her daughter's disappearance, he leaned heavily on a highly specific detail to prove how desperately he had tried to save her. He swore to Darlene that as he drifted helplessly in the pitch-black ocean, he frantically pulled out his flare gun and fired off two bright emergency flares into the midnight sky, desperate to alert any passing vessels. He claimed two massive boats actually cruised right past him in the darkness, ignoring the fiery red distress signals entirely. It was a perfect, heartbreaking narrative designed to paint him as a helpless victim of a cruel, uncaring ocean. But modern forensic science does not care about emotional alibis. When the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service officially seized the Soulmate and hauled it into dry dock for deep dive processing, federal technicians immediately located the flare gun. When they unsealed the weapon, the entire illusion shattered. Brian had not fired both flares. Only a single flare had actually been discharged into the night sky. Sitting directly inside the chamber of the gun was a live, unpopped emergency round. The gun was still loaded. He had intentionally lied to his mother-in-law about his desperate rescue attempts, hiding the fact that he kept a secondary lifeline completely silent while his wife was allegedly drowning in the waves. This chilling discovery directly aligns with the deeply unsettling behavior observed by the local rescue teams back in the Bahamas. When Brian originally begged the fire and rescue representatives for help, he dramatically asked them where he could immediately rent a boat so he could go out on the water and search for his missing wife. Desperate to help, the rescue personnel gave him the direct contact information for a local boat rental. But when those same rescuers checked back with the rental company days later, the workers dropped a chilling reality check. Brian Hooker never called. He never showed up. He never spent a single dollar or a single second trying to secure a boat to look for Lynette. Instead, while volunteer searchers were out combing the rough waters until dawn, Brian was already executing a highly calculated game plan behind the scenes, ensuring his own survival while leaving Lynette's family completely in the dark.